Leave the queen behind. Save yourselves. The words came from the royal guard commander, and in that single sentence, Queen Seraphina Valer realized she had never truly been protected at all. The grand halls of the Illyrian diplomatic palace had been built to represent unity between worlds, with towering silver walls, crystal ceilings, and symbols of peace carved into every surface. But in that moment, all those symbols meant nothing. The warriors who had sworn their lives to her were already moving toward the evacuation corridor. They were not looking back. Sergeant Daniel Carter stood 20 feet away, watching the most powerful soldiers in the room abandon the person they were meant to defend. He tightened his grip on his rifle, not because he was fearless, but because he understood exactly what was happening. The mission had changed. The rules had changed. But one thing had not changed. Someone still needed to stay. Sergeant Carter, Queen Seraphina said quietly, her voice controlled but carrying disbelief. Your forces have been ordered to withdraw as well. Daniel looked toward the corridor where the alien guards disappeared behind the heavy doors. Then he looked back at her. No, Your Majesty. That was an order, she replied. Daniel shook his head slightly. That was their order. The queen studied him carefully. Humans were still considered a young species by most civilizations in the galaxy. They were clever, stubborn, and strangely adaptable, but many older species viewed them as physically limited and strategically reckless. Illyrian warriors were stronger. Their armor was more advanced. Their history stretched back thousands of years. Daniel Carter was just one human soldier wearing practical equipment and carrying a weapon many alien commanders considered outdated. Yet he was the only one still standing beside her. You understand your chances are not favorable, Seraphina said. Yes. You understand there may be no rescue coming. Yes. Then why are you still here? For a moment, Daniel said nothing. He thought about the question. He thought about every soldier he had served with, every person who had depended on someone else showing up when things became difficult. He had learned something years ago. Courage was not about believing you would win. Courage was deciding someone was worth protecting even when you might not. Because my assignment was to protect you, he finally said. And I have not finished my assignment. The queen looked at him differently after that. Not like a soldier from a younger civilization. Not like a temporary guard hired by humans trying to prove themselves. She saw someone who had made a choice. Outside the palace, alarms echoed across the city. The entire diplomatic district had gone silent. The galaxy was watching. They expected the human soldier to disappear like everyone else. They expected him to understand his place. But Daniel Carter had never measured his duty by whether someone else was watching. You humans are strange, Seraphina whispered. Daniel checked the equipment on his belt and looked toward the sealed entrance. We hear that a lot. For the first time that day, the queen almost smiled. Then Daniel took his position between her and the empty hallway. A single human soldier, one alien queen, and an entire galaxy about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was never the weapons they carried. It was the promise they refused to break. The first thing Daniel Carter noticed was not the silence. It was the missing sound. A royal palace protected by the Illyrian guard was never quiet. There were always footsteps, communication signals, security updates, and the steady movement of soldiers trained to react before danger arrived. But now, standing in the center of the abandoned diplomatic chamber, Daniel heard nothing except the distant hum of the emergency systems and Queen Seraphina Valer breathing beside him. The people who were supposed to keep her safe were gone. Daniel glanced at the damaged security display on the wall. The palace network was failing section by section, cutting them off from the rest of the city. He had less than 10 minutes before the entire diplomatic wing would be isolated. Can you reach your fleet? Daniel asked. The queen looked toward the ceiling, where the communication lights flickered weakly. My fleet does not answer. Daniel nodded slowly. He expected that answer. Someone had planned this carefully. This was not a random attack. It was a test. A way to see what the Illyrian royal family would do when their confidence disappeared. Seraphina watched him closely. You are not surprised. Daniel looked back at her. I am surprised. By what? That they left so quickly. The queen lowered her eyes. For the first time since Daniel had met her, she looked less like a ruler and more like someone trying to understand a painful truth. Commander Cale Varen has served my family for 20 years, she said. He trained those guards personally. Daniel carefully moved toward the damaged entrance and checked the corridor ahead. People reveal who they are when things stop going their way. The queen studied him. You speak as if you have seen this before. Daniel paused. He had. Not on another planet. Not in a palace. But he had seen people abandon responsibility when the cost became too high. He had seen good people hesitate. He had seen leaders make decisions from comfortable rooms while others paid the price. A long time ago, I learned that a promise means nothing when it is easy to keep, Daniel said. The hard part is keeping it when nobody would blame you for walking away. Serafina remained silent. She had spent her entire life surrounded by warriors who talked about honor, duty, and sacrifice. But this human was the first person she had seen who carried those words without needing anyone to praise him for it. Suddenly, Daniel raised his hand. The queen stopped moving. "What is it?" she whispered. He pointed toward the far hallway. A small indicator on his device had changed. Someone was moving through the palace. Not running. Not searching randomly. Moving with purpose. Daniel looked at the queen. "We need to leave." "Where?" she asked. He looked toward a narrow service passage hidden behind the diplomatic chamber. "Somewhere they will not expect a royal target to go." The queen followed him, still trying to understand the human beside her. "You know this palace better than my own guards." Daniel shook his head. "No." He opened the hidden passage. "I just know that people who think they have already won usually stop looking at the places they consider beneath them." As they disappeared into the dark maintenance corridor, the palace behind them became colder and quieter. But somewhere above them, Commander Kale Varen received a message that changed everything. The queen was still alive, and the only person standing between him and complete control of Illyria was a single human soldier who refused to leave. The hidden maintenance corridor beneath the Illyrian palace had not been designed for royalty. It was narrow, practical, and completely forgotten by the people who walked the polished halls above. Queen Serafina Vaylor moved through the dim passage beside Daniel Carter, still trying to understand the human soldier who had chosen a place most warriors would never want to be. "You knew exactly where to go," she said quietly. Daniel kept his eyes forward. "I knew where people stopped paying attention." The queen looked around at the old pipes, service panels, and unfinished metal walls. "My architects considered these areas insignificant. That is why they are useful," Daniel replied. His answer was simple, but it stayed with her. For generations, Illyrian society had valued appearances. Their palaces represented perfection. Their soldiers represented superiority. Everything had a place, everything had a purpose, and everything had to look impressive. Humanity seemed different. They built things to survive. They valued what worked, even if nobody admired it. A soft signal came from Daniel's device. He stopped immediately. "Someone is trying to access the main security system." Serafina turned toward him. "Can you identify them?" Daniel studied the small display. "Not yet." Before she could ask another question, a communication channel suddenly activated. A familiar voice filled the corridor. "Your Majesty." Queen Serafina froze. She recognized the voice instantly. Commander Kale Varen, the leader of her royal guard. The person who had promised to protect her family. "Commander," she answered carefully. "Explain why my guards abandoned the palace." There was a pause. Not a moment of confusion. A moment of calculation. "Because survival requires difficult choices," Kale responded. Daniel noticed the change in the queen's expression. She was not angry. She was disappointed. "You left your queen behind," Serafina said. "I preserved the future of Illyria," Kale replied. "A ruler can be replaced. A trained military force cannot." Daniel looked away for a second. He understood that kind of thinking. It was the kind of logic people used when they wanted to make a selfish decision sound reasonable. Kale continued, "The human soldier with you is not enough. He cannot protect you forever." Daniel stepped closer to the communication panel. "He is right about one thing." The queen looked at him. "What thing?" Daniel answered calmly. "I cannot protect you forever." The corridor became silent. Then Daniel continued, "That was never the plan." Serafina watched him carefully. "Then what is the plan?" Daniel looked toward the exit ahead. "Get you somewhere safe. Then make sure the people who caused this understand that leaving someone behind has consequences." For the first time, the queen saw something unusual in his expression. Not anger. Not revenge. Something colder. Determination. Meanwhile, inside the upper levels of the palace, Commander Kale stood in the command chamber, surrounded by officers who had chosen his side. He believed the crisis was already solved. The queen was isolated. The human soldier was only delaying the inevitable. But one of his officers hesitated while reviewing the palace systems. "Commander," There is something strange. Kale turned. What? The officer looked at the screen. The human is not moving randomly. He is guiding her through sections of the palace that even our security teams rarely monitor. Kale stared at the information for a long moment. For the first time, a small doubt appeared in his mind. Perhaps humanity was not as simple as he believed. Below the palace, Daniel reached the end of the corridor and opened a sealed emergency door. Beyond it was an old communications chamber built before Illyria joined the wider galaxy. A place forgotten by modern systems. A place where old messages could still be sent. Queen Seraphina looked at the ancient equipment and then at Daniel. What are you doing? Daniel activated the console, making sure someone knows what happened here. The screen flickered back to life. A single connection request appeared. Earth Command. And on the other side of the galaxy, someone was about to receive a message that would change how humanity was viewed forever. The emergency communication chamber had not been used in decades. Dust covered the old consoles, the lights flickered weakly, and the entire room looked like a forgotten piece of Illyrian history. But to Daniel Carter, it was exactly what they needed. Forgotten places were often the safest places. He connected the system manually, ignoring the outdated interface and the unfamiliar symbols. Queen Seraphina watched in silence as the human soldier worked through technology created by a civilization far older than his own. You do not know this system, she said. Daniel kept his attention on the screen. No. Then how are you operating it? Daniel adjusted a connection cable and looked at the damaged signal display. Because every system has a weakness. The queen almost smiled. It was the first time she had seen someone treat advanced alien technology like an ordinary problem instead of something impossible. Then the console finally responded. A communication channel opened. For a brief moment, the room was filled with static. Then a voice answered. Unidentified signal. State your authorization. Daniel pressed the transmitter. This is Sergeant Daniel Carter, Earth Security Division. Emergency priority. Diplomatic protection failure on Illyria. There was a pause. Then the voice changed. Sergeant Carter, confirm your status. Alive. With Queen Seraphina Vaylor. Hostile takeover in progress. The silence on the other end lasted only a few seconds, but Daniel understood what it meant. Earth had received the message. The galaxy would know soon. Suddenly, the lights above them changed. The old system detected unauthorized access. Daniel immediately looked toward the corridor. We need to move. Queen Seraphina turned. They found us. Daniel nodded. They found the signal. The emergency door behind them locked automatically. A warning appeared across the console. Someone was overriding the security controls from the Palace Command Center. Commander Kale was no longer waiting. He was coming for them. Daniel moved toward another exit, but the door remained sealed. He examined the control panel. Can you open it? The Queen asked. Eventually. How long? Daniel looked at the countdown on the system. Too long. Footsteps echoed from the other side of the corridor. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Whoever was approaching believed they already had control. Queen Seraphina looked at Daniel. You should leave me. Daniel glanced at her. Why does everyone keep suggesting that? Because it is logical. Daniel shook his head. Maybe for them. He pointed toward the locked door. But I have learned something about people who make decisions based only on logic. What? They usually forget there are things worth protecting. The door suddenly unlocked. Not because of Daniel. Because someone on the other side wanted it open. Commander Kale stepped into view with several armed Royal Guard officers behind him. His armor was polished. His expression was calm. He looked at Daniel as if he were studying a strange animal. I expected more from humanity, Kale said. You truly believed one soldier could change the outcome. Daniel stood between him and the Queen. No. Kale raised an eyebrow. No. Daniel looked around the room. I never thought one soldier could change everything. He paused. I thought one soldier could buy enough time. Kale did not understand the meaning behind those words. But Queen Seraphina did. Daniel was not trying to win a battle alone. He was creating a moment. A delay. A chance. Kale stepped forward, confident that the situation was finished. Then every screen in the chamber suddenly activated. A new transmission appeared. Earth Command had received the emergency signal. The entire galaxy was now watching. The commander looked at the display, and for the first time, his confidence disappeared. Because he finally understood the mistake he had made. He had not trapped the Queen with a human soldier. He had trapped himself in front of an entire civilization that had just been given a reason to pay attention. Commander Kale Varen stood in the center of the emergency chamber, surrounded by the very soldiers who had abandoned their queen only minutes earlier. His expression remained calm, almost confident, as if he still believed the situation was completely under his control. But the large display behind Daniel Carter told a different story. Earth Command had received the message. The galaxy was listening. Queen Seraphina looked at Kale with a quiet disappointment that was far more powerful than anger. "You should have hidden your betrayal better," she said. Kale's expression tightened. "Betrayal?" he replied. "Your Majesty, I made the decision necessary to preserve Illyria." Daniel watched him carefully. This was the part he had seen many times before. People rarely admitted they were wrong. They created explanations. They built excuses. They convinced themselves that the choice they made was the only possible choice. "You left your queen because you thought the situation was hopeless," Daniel said. Kale looked toward him. "And you stayed because you believe you are different?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I stayed because someone had to." That answer bothered Kale more than any threat could have. The commander understood weapons. He understood armies. He understood strategy. But he did not understand someone making a choice without expecting a reward. "Human soldiers are strange," Kale said. "You sacrifice yourselves for symbols." Daniel looked at Queen Seraphina. Then he looked back at Kale. "No, we protect people." The room became silent. Even some of the Illyrian guards behind Kale avoided looking directly at their commander. They had expected the human to act like a warrior seeking glory. Instead, he acted like someone simply doing what he believed was right. Kale noticed the hesitation among his own soldiers. That was the first sign that his control was slipping. "Do not listen to him," Kale ordered. "Humanity is young. They do not understand the responsibilities of power." Queen Seraphina stepped forward. "And you do?" Kale turned toward her. "I understand survival." "No," she replied. "You understand fear." The words hit harder than Daniel expected. The queen who had spent her life surrounded by powerful warriors was finally seeing them clearly. The most advanced armor in the galaxy did not matter if the person wearing it abandoned their duty. Suddenly, a new message appeared on the main display. It was not from Earth Command. It was from the Illyrian capital. The entire Royal Council had seen the transmission. They had watched the guards retreat. They had watched Daniel remain. Kale moved toward the console. "Turn that off." Nobody moved. The council representative appeared on screen. "Commander Varen," the voice said. "Explain why the human soldier is standing beside our queen while your entire unit withdrew." Kale opened his mouth, but no answer came. Daniel noticed something important. The battle was no longer happening inside the palace. It was happening in the minds of everyone watching. The galaxy had spent years believing humans were reckless, emotional, and inexperienced. But now they were seeing something different. A soldier with no royal title, no legendary armor, no ancient bloodline, just a promise he refused to break. Then the lights suddenly changed again. A new alert appeared across the screen. Unknown ships had entered Illyrian airspace. Kale looked at the information and his confidence returned for a moment. "You see," he said, "this is not over." Daniel studied the incoming signal. He did not panic. He did not celebrate. He simply read the information carefully. "No," he said quietly. "It is not over." Queen Seraphina looked at him. "What did you find?" Daniel turned toward the display. "Those ships are not here for you." A pause followed. "They are here because Earth answered." And for the first time, Commander Kale Varen realized he had not created a crisis for humanity. He had created a reason for humanity to arrive. The arrival of the Earth ships changed the atmosphere inside the Illyrian palace instantly. For the first time that day, Commander Kale Varen did not have an answer ready. He had spent years studying civilizations across the galaxy. He knew how older species thought. He knew how younger species reacted under pressure. But humanity was not reacting the way he expected. The large display showed several human vessels entering Illyrian airspace. They were not the elegant ships favored by the ancient powers of the galaxy. They looked practical, reinforced, built for purpose rather than appearance. Queen Seraphina watched the incoming fleet carefully. "Those ships came because of one message?" she asked. Daniel Carter nodded. "One message is enough when the right people receive it." Kale stepped closer to the screen. "You misunderstand your position, human. Your civilization is thousands of years behind ours. You cannot simply arrive and interfere in Illyrian affairs." Daniel looked at him calmly. "That is interesting." "What is?" Kale asked. "You keep talking about power. But you are the one who called for help from soldiers who abandoned their queen. The commander said nothing. The words had landed exactly where Daniel intended. Kale was not afraid of humanity's fleet. He was afraid of what humanity represented. A civilization where a single soldier could send a message and know someone would answer. Meanwhile, outside the palace, Earth forces established communication with Illyrian command. They did not demand surrender. They did not threaten destruction. They requested one thing: a full investigation into what happened. The simplicity of the request confused the Illyrian officers watching the transmission. They expected anger. They expected revenge. Instead, they received procedure. Daniel noticed Queen Seraphina studying the human response. "You are not here to punish them," she said. Daniel looked at the display. "No." "Then why come?" Daniel took a moment before answering. "Because if someone can abandon a person today and everyone ignores it, tomorrow they will abandon someone else." The queen remembered the moment her guards left. She remembered the feeling of standing alone in a room filled with people who had promised loyalty. Then she looked at Daniel. The human soldier had every reason to leave. Yet he stayed. Suddenly, Kale's personal communicator activated. A private message appeared. His expression changed slightly as he read it. Daniel noticed. "Bad news." Kale ignored him. "This is irrelevant." But it was not irrelevant. The message came from several members of the royal guard. They were not asking for orders. They were asking questions. They had seen the broadcast. They had seen their commander abandon the queen. And now they were questioning who they had truly followed. Kale turned away, trying to hide his frustration. His entire plan depended on one belief: that everyone would choose survival over loyalty. But the human soldier had just proven the opposite. Then Kale made his final move. He activated an emergency royal authority code. The palace systems changed immediately. Doors sealed. Communications shifted. The commander looked toward the queen. "For the safety of Illyria, I am assuming temporary control until this crisis is resolved." Seraphina stared at him. "You are removing my authority. I am protecting your kingdom." Daniel watched the exchange carefully. This was no longer about the attack outside. Kale had revealed what he truly wanted: control. He had not saved Illyria from chaos. He had used chaos as a path to power. Daniel stepped forward. "You made one mistake." Kale looked at him. "And what is that?" Daniel answered quietly. "You thought the queen was the only person you needed to convince." Outside the palace, more signals appeared across the network. The citizens of Illyria had received the broadcast. The soldiers had seen it. The council had seen it. And now the entire kingdom knew exactly who stayed when everyone else ran. Kale looked at the growing number of messages on his screen, and for the first time, he realized the palace was no longer under his control. Because loyalty could not be commanded. It had to be earned. The palace had always been built to make people feel small. The massive silver towers, the endless halls, and the ancient symbols carved into every wall were designed to remind visitors that Illyria was one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. But now those same halls carried a different feeling. Uncertainty. The emergency authority code had been activated, and Commander Kale Varen believed he had taken control. He stood at the center of the royal command chamber, surrounded by officers who were no longer sure if they were following a leader or watching the beginning of a mistake. Queen Seraphina remained calm beside Daniel Carter, but Daniel noticed something important. The queen was not afraid of losing her power. She was afraid of losing the trust of her people. "Commander," she said, looking directly at Kale. "You call this protection?" Kale kept his posture firm. "I call it responsibility. The kingdom cannot be guided by emotions during a crisis." Daniel looked around the room. Interesting choice of words. Kale turned toward him. "You have something to say, human?" Daniel nodded slightly. "You keep saying emotions are dangerous. But every decision you made today came from fear." Several officers looked away. They had heard the truth, even if they did not want to admit it. Kale's expression hardened. "You believe one act of loyalty makes you understand leadership?" Daniel answered without raising his voice. "No, but one act of abandoning someone tells me a lot about a leader." The room became silent. Kale had spent his life building his reputation around discipline and strategy. He believed control was strength. He believed people followed whoever had the most power. He did not understand that some people followed because they trusted someone. A message appeared on the main display. It was from the Illyrian Royal Council. They had reached a decision. Kale stepped forward confidently, expecting support. Instead, The council representative looked directly at him. Commander Varen, temporary authority is suspended. Kale froze. On what grounds? The representative answered, the Royal Protection Unit failed its primary duty. An investigation will determine why. Kale's eyes narrowed. You are allowing an outsider to influence Illyrian law. The council member looked toward Daniel. The outsider was the only protector who remained. Those words spread through the chamber like a shockwave. The officers standing beside Kale began lowering their weapons and stepping away from him. Not because Daniel ordered them to. Not because Earth demanded it. Because they had seen the truth. Kale realized his own soldiers were no longer looking at him with respect. They were questioning him. And that was something he could not control. Then the palace alarms changed. A new alert appeared. Unknown vessels were approaching the planet. Everyone turned toward the display. The incoming ships were not from Earth. They were from a faction known across the galaxy for exploiting weakened governments. Kale looked at the screen and immediately understood the danger. They are coming for Illyria. Queen Seraphina looked at him. And what will you do, Commander? For a moment, Kale said nothing. Daniel noticed the hesitation. The same hesitation that had appeared when the palace was attacked. Kale had been willing to protect his position. But now the kingdom itself needed protection. The queen turned toward Daniel. Can your people help us? Daniel looked at the approaching signals. They already are. Then what happens now? She asked. Daniel checked his equipment and looked toward the palace entrance. Now we find out who is willing to stand when there is no guarantee of victory. The doors opened. Outside waited a kingdom watching, a fleet approaching, and a moment that would decide whether Illyria learned from its mistake or repeated it. And for the first time, Commander Kale Varen realized the human soldier was not his greatest threat. The greatest threat was the truth everyone had finally seen. The approaching fleet appeared on every screen across Illyria, and for the first time in generations, the people of the planet saw something they had never expected to see. Their ancient capital was uncertain. Their commanders were divided. And the one person standing beside their queen was a human soldier who was never supposed to be important. Daniel Carter watched the incoming signals carefully. The ships were moving fast, but they were not attacking. They were positioning themselves around the planet. Waiting. They are not here to destroy us, Daniel said. Queen Seraphina looked at him. How can you know that? Daniel pointed at the display. Because if they wanted destruction, they would not announce their arrival. Kale Varen, standing several feet away, listened closely. He had spent years studying military strategy, but he could not understand why Daniel remained calm when an unknown fleet surrounded their world. You assume too much confidence for someone with limited information, Kale said. Daniel glanced at him. No, I assume people have patterns. Patterns? Kale asked. Fear makes people rush. Confidence makes people show off. Whoever is out there wants everyone watching. The queen looked at the human soldier. He was not guessing. He was observing. That difference was becoming clearer with every passing moment. Then the fleet sent a message. The communication channel opened across the royal command chamber. A new face appeared on the screen. Admiral Voss of the neighboring Archon Dominion, a powerful military faction known for expanding into weakened territories. Queen Seraphina Valer, the admiral said, your government has suffered an internal security failure. For the protection of Illyria, the Archon Dominion offers temporary assistance. Everyone in the room understood the meaning behind those words. It was not an offer. It was an opportunity disguised as help. The queen remained silent. Daniel watched her carefully. She was learning. She was no longer listening only to words. She was looking for intentions. And what does the Dominion expect in return? Seraphina asked. Admiral Voss smiled slightly. Only cooperation. A temporary alliance. Shared security oversight. Daniel quietly shook his head. The queen noticed. You disagree? She asked. Daniel answered softly. They are not offering protection. Then what are they offering? A reason to stay. The room became quiet. Everyone understood. The Dominion did not need to conquer Illyria if Illyria invited them inside. Suddenly, a smaller signal appeared on Daniel's screen. It was hidden beneath the official communication. A private message. He opened it carefully. His expression changed for the first time. Queen Seraphina noticed immediately. What is it? Daniel looked at the message again. The attack on your palace was not random. Kale looked surprised. What are you saying? Daniel turned toward him. The people who attacked knew exactly when the defenses would be lowered. They knew which guards would retreat. They knew the emergency routes. The room went silent. The queen looked at Kale. The commander looked away. Daniel continued. Someone inside Illyria helped them. The accusation changed everything. This was no longer just a failed defense. It was a planned operation. Kale immediately stepped forward. You are suggesting betrayal without proof. Daniel looked at him calmly. No, I am saying someone wanted you to believe you had no choice. The queen studied everyone in the room. Her guards, her advisors, her commanders, people she had trusted for years. Then Daniel received another message. This one was from Earth Command. The information was simple. They had traced the original attack. They had found the source. Daniel looked at Queen Seraphina. Your Majesty, we know who opened the door. Everyone waited for the answer. Even Kale. Because the truth was finally about to reveal whether the greatest threat to Illyria came from outside its borders or from someone who had been standing inside all along. The entire royal chamber went silent when Daniel Carter finally revealed the truth. Everyone waited for him to name a hidden enemy, a foreign power, or some unknown force that had manipulated the crisis. But the answer was closer than anyone expected. The security failure came from inside the royal guard, Daniel said. Queen Seraphina looked toward Commander Kale Varen. For a moment, nobody moved. Kale did not look surprised. That was the part that confirmed everything. You already knew, the queen said quietly. Kale remained silent. The years of loyalty, the speeches about honor, the promises made before the throne, all of it was now being measured against one simple truth. He had chosen control over duty. I did what was necessary, Kale finally said. Illyria was becoming weak. Your compassion was making us vulnerable. The queen stared at him. Compassion made us vulnerable? She asked. Or did it simply make us different from you? Daniel watched the exchange without interrupting. He understood something about people like Kale. They rarely believed they were the villain of their own story. They convinced themselves that every selfish choice was actually a sacrifice for a greater purpose. But leadership was not about controlling people. It was about carrying responsibility when control was impossible. Admiral Voss from the Archon Dominion watched the situation carefully through the communication channel. He had expected Illyria to collapse. He had expected confusion. Instead, he saw something unexpected. A kingdom that was finally seeing clearly. Queen Seraphina stepped forward. The Dominion will not receive authority over Illyria. Admiral Voss looked surprised. Your Majesty, your defenses failed. She nodded. Yes. Then she looked at Daniel. But one person remained. Those words traveled through every broadcast channel connected to the palace. Across Illyria, citizens watched the human soldier standing quietly beside their queen. No grand speech. No demand for recognition. Just a person who kept a promise. Commander Kale lowered his head. For the first time, he understood what he had lost. Not power. Not position. Respect. The soldiers who once followed him had not been convinced by force. They had simply seen the difference between someone who talked about loyalty and someone who lived it. The investigation that followed changed Illyria forever. The Royal Guard was rebuilt, not around tradition or appearance, but around responsibility. The old belief that strength came from status was replaced by a new understanding. Strength came from what someone chose to do when nobody expected them to stay. Weeks later, Queen Seraphina met Daniel on the observation deck overlooking Illyria's capital. The city below was peaceful again. You could have left many times, she said. Daniel looked out at the stars. Yes. Why did you not? He thought about the question for a moment. Because someone needed to know they were not alone. The queen smiled softly. For generations, Illyria had measured warriors by victories, titles, and power. Humanity had shown them something different. Sometimes the strongest person in the room was not the one who could defeat everyone else. Sometimes it was the person who stayed when everyone else decided leaving was easier. Daniel Carter returned to Earth without a royal title or a place in history books. He never asked for recognition. But across the galaxy, one lesson remained. A promise means the most when keeping it costs something. And from that day forward, whenever someone asked what made humans dangerous, the answer was simple. It was not their weapons. It was not their technology. It was the fact that when humanity said someone would not be abandoned, they meant it.